Hello, my name is Dr. Stephen Cangiano. I am the president and co-founder of RDT.Media and Events with its online companions, relationship-development.com and humanity-upgrade.com. I'm here today with Dr. Loretta Graziano Breuning. I have read her books. I highly recommend her information. It has really put a lot of pieces of the puzzle together for me on how the brain works and how this brain functions in society. I'm going to do a brief bio, then we're going to have a really clarifying, in-depth discussion with Loretta. Thank you for being here, Loretta. Loretta is a professor emerita of management at California State University, East Bay. As a teacher and a mom, she was not convinced by prevailing theories of human motivation. Then she learned about the brain chemistry of animals and everything made sense, and it will make sense for you today. I knew this information could help people, so I set about creating resources. These resources have been translated into Spanish, Russian, Chinese, Arabic, French, and Turkish. Now, before becoming a teacher, she worked in as the United Nations volunteer in Africa, where she learned about the mammalian custom of bribery. Now she's a volunteer as a docent in the Oakland Zoo, where she gives family-friendly tours on social behaviors of animals. She's actually originally from the Northeast, where I am. She went to Cornell, and originally from New York City, went to Cornell and Tufts. And she's the mother of 2 tax-paying adults. Congratulations on that. She grew up with a lot of conflict and struggled to make sense of it. When she learned about conflict within an animal herd or pack troop, I could accept the frictions of life instead of getting frustrated. Learning about the brain chemistry behind mammalian social drama gave me peace. She escaped college, where she learned capitalism is the cause of conflict. She escaped to Africa after grad school, where she noticed that Africa has conflict too. I learned that everyone expected me to agree with their view of conflict. I handled that by reading and writing. We're going to talk about that. And finally, most people around me think nature is all good and our society is the cause of all bad, but the facts don't support this, and we are free to follow the facts. Okay, an interesting bio. Was there anything that you wanted to add in? Anything I missed that you wanted to add into that?
Yeah, I'd just love to know which one of my books you read.
I read and listened to Habits of a Happy Brain. Phenomenal. I recommend it to anyone. I don't care what field or what business you're in. It would really, really upgrade your life. We call, part of what we do here is we call Humanity Upgrade. That was a major upgrade for me.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
It was really good. It really was. You know, I'd love to unpack some of the stuff in the bio here, because you make some statements that are really interesting to me. Here's what it says. Every day I appreciate the similarity between the field notes of a primatologist who is somebody who studies primates, and the lyrics to a love song. Can you help me understand that one?
Well, the lyrics of a love song, as we know, they express a certain level of, let's say, desperation, okay? Oh, I must have you. And in the animal world, anyone who studied evolutionary biology or evolutionary psychology, spreading your genes is what counts. And the brain built by natural selection rewards you with positive chemistry when you have an opportunity to promote your genes, and it alarms you with threat chemicals when there's the slightest obstacle to your opportunity to promote your genes. And when I say promote your genes, I mean this in a very broad sense, which you would understand if you've studied this, or I'd be happy to elaborate. And when I say also the similarity, I think in the rest of the quote I said, I can't remember, but also you can see primatology at work in the office and in all of our conversations, because we mammals have such an urgent surge of chemistry when we have any opportunity to spread our unique individual essence. And we feel so alarmed when we see the slightest opportunity to the spreading of our unique individual essence.
Yeah, I agree. And as we get into this today, people who are listening to it are going to understand those statements more and more as we talk about the brain chemicals. It's really fascinating. You talk about you talk about in a couple of places. You talk about the cause of conflict and conflict. What has brain chemistry and being an international relations expert taught you about conflict?
Well, conflict is endless. We work very hard to moderate it. We don't give ourselves enough credit for how hard we are working and how much we are succeeding at restraining that impulse. Because if you watched animals in the wild, they have a lot of conflict and it erupts. Then we often hear about how they soothe, how they make up. Um, but in the human world, you can walk through a city of strangers without anybody biting you. And so the natural impulse to promote your interests is very strong, and natural selection built a brain that rewards you with positive chemistry when you promote your interests. And I'm not saying that that means we should be jerks, but it's why we have to work so hard to balance that brain and get that positive chemistry going without being a jerk.
Gotcha. And then in the end here, maybe this relates to what you just said. Most people around me think nature is all good and our society, in quotations, is the cause of all bad. But the facts don't support this, and we are free. We are free to follow the facts. Tell me, tell me what your thoughts are on that statement.
Okay. So the facts I'm referring to are the endless conflict among animals. The current view from academia is that animals are loving and caring and supportive and nurturing, and we only hear about it when animals have behaviors that are consistent with the way academics think the modern world should be. The rest of the time when animals are biting each other, they just leave that out and they condemn anyone who acknowledges it, which is why only someone retired like me can acknowledge it. Now, for the past century, there was plenty of research on the truth about animals. Before that, humans lived alongside animals for thousands and millions of years and observed the truth of how animals interact. So it's only today with us city folk who don't know instinctively the truth about animals that you can feed us this academic line that animals are so cooperative. And I'll give you the funniest example. I was getting a tour. Oh, this is at the beginning of my book, I Mammal. I was getting a tour of a farm from a farmer, and he was showing me his cows and he was so proud of them. And he was telling me about how he has to hire bulls to come and fertilize them. And I said, naively, like a city girl, I said, well, why do you have to hire bulls? Half of the calves that are born are bulls. Why don't you use them? And he said, oh, we could never manage having bulls around unless they're castrated because there'd be too much conflict. And he laughed at me like, well, everybody knows that natural hormonal bulls can't be kept in captivity.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that. So, and then this will actually come up in detail as we go through this. I want to start.
By the way, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. I shouldn't say kept in captivity because, of course, listeners would think, oh, of course, captivity is bad. I don't mean that. I mean kept in a social setting. So they need to be distant from other hormonal males. That's what I meant.
Got it. Okay, good. So one of the examples you give, and that this is going to kind of lead us into identifying the happy hormones and then cortisol, the unhappy hormones, and there's many other, but those are the five I think we're probably going to focus on. Give us the story, and we in academia we tend to use these big terms, so I really want to break this down because it's really important because it applies to our life as well. It's called hedonic adaptation or the hedonic treadmill. Give us the spinach juice story of the monkeys and how that's relevant to our daily lives.
Yes. Okay. So the bottom line of this story is that when you get something new, you get a big surge of dopamine, which feels great. But if you get that new thing regularly, you don't get the dopamine anymore because your brain already expects it. So it's not something new. But then if you lose that thing, then you get unhappy chemicals, a surge of threat feelings, which is awful. And so something that didn't make you happy when you have it can now make you unhappy. So
Loretta, let me do one
yeah,
second. Let me just, so tell people what dopamine is and how it it pervades their life. And they don't, maybe people don't even know the term, but
yeah.
dopamine in many ways controls your life on on a daily basis. Tell them what dopamine is, then we'll get into the other ones later. Tell them what
Okay.
dopamine is and how it can control their life.
Okay. And when I say it controls your life on a moment to moment basis, and that's what it's supposed to be doing. So people who associate dopamine with addiction, that's because they're only focusing on one narrow problem rather than the normal functioning of dopamine, which is in all of us. And I don't like the way we're constantly encouraged to have a disease focus on ourselves and not to celebrate our natural functioning. So let's see it from a monkey example. Monkeys do not have refrigerators. So when they're hungry, they have to find something to eat. That's the job our brain evolved to do, is not to sit around on the couch and walk to the refrigerator, but to find food. So when a monkey is hungry, that's stress chemical, cortisol. And the monkey has learned from experience, how can I relieve that bad feeling? I have to look around for food. Look, look, look. Oh, there's something. And that's what dopamine is. It's there's something that can meet my needs and I can get it. And that dopamine motivates the monkey to take a step toward the reward. It releases your energy. And when you get a little closer to the reward, then you get more dopamine and drip, drip, drip of dopamine. Good feeling, good feeling, good feeling whenever you're approaching something that you expect to meet your needs and relieve that survival threat feeling. Now, when you get more than you expected, then you get a big surge of dopamine, like that winning the lottery feeling. Like if a monkey is looking for food and finds a whole tree full of ripe mangoes, which is not ordinary. And so we are not expected to have that euphoric feeling every minute of every day. And I think it's very unhealthy to set that expectation for people. So in this experiment that I'm talking about, they fed the monkeys, they gave the monkeys a spinach leaf in exchange for doing a particular task. And then one day, without warning, they gave them a sip of juice from a juice box instead of a spinach leaf. And that triggered a surge of dopamine because sugar is not natural. I mean, you don't get that much sugar in the state of nature. And it was like, wow, this is a huge reward. So your body knows that that meets your needs more than expected. And every day the experiment continued. They gave the monkeys a sip of juice instead of spinach. And every day they got a little less dopamine. And after 4 days, they got none. And that teaches us that dopamine's job is not only to alert you and reward you with a good feeling when you see a way to meet your needs, but to connect neurons so that you now have that knowledge of how to meet your needs in that way again. But once those neurons are connected, dopamine has done its job. Now you expect that sip of juice. And so it doesn't seem like an extra special reward. And so what the experimenters did, once the dopamine stopped, they stopped giving the monkeys the juice and started giving them spinach instead. And the monkeys flew into a rage and threw the spinach back at the experimenters, which is so funny. And it is so akin to our daily lives. Now, academics always try to make an injustice thing out of this. But the bottom line is that people want, and they want more, and it's natural. Our brain evolved to want more. And if you hate yourself for wanting more, and if you hate everyone around you for wanting more, then your life is filled with hate. So it's better to celebrate. I inherited a brain that wants more. It is a skillful brain, and another one of my skills is to moderate my wants to keep me out of trouble, and that's why we each have to work on that balance.
Yeah, and great. So let's break this down. Let's unpack a lot of this because there's so many gems hidden in this little story here. First of all, so the hedonic treadmill or adaptation is the monkeys loved that juice, but by day 4, they expected it. And the dopamine was gone.
They took it for granted.
They took it for granted like many people do. And when they went back to spinach, where they were happy with originally, they hated it.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that is the essence of, I guess, the hedonic treadmill. Now, maybe comment, because I remember reading about this, where people get addicted to achieving goals because dopamine will drive you to do that. And most people aren't aware that this brain chemistry is actually controlling their life. So maybe talk a little bit about that. And then I actually have a question about one of my pets, but go ahead.
Sure. So what's actually controlling your life is the neural pathway that tells you this is the way to get dopamine, which is why we're also individual in the way we do it. So one person, as you mentioned, if they achieve a certain goal, they got that wow feeling, and now they have a circuit where they want to do that again and again. So you could think of the juice as like getting a raise. And like, oh, but now I have to get another raise. But another person, that juice is finishing a marathon. Now they have to run another marathon. Another person is taking a drug. Another person is eating a cookie. So whatever gave you that feeling of, wow, this is really good, then you want more of that.
Right. And when does that become an addiction, Loretta? In other words, this constant goal seeking, more. When does that become an addiction for people? What's the threshold or the boundary?
Well, addiction is a word we all know used by the system to trigger benefits, to trigger funding of treatment. So just using the word, you put on the treatment lens. And I don't like putting on the treatment lens because the treatment lens says somebody else needs to fix me the way my car needs to be fixed. You bring it in the shop and somebody else fixes you.
Okay.
And I like to help people take responsibility for their own brain. So I say everything's addicted. You know, if I have a lick of ice cream, it's like, oh my God, I love ice cream. So does that mean, well, it's not my fault that I eat a whole tub of ice cream because I'm addicted to it? No, every brain has that impulse to seek, and every brain has that need to moderate that impulse in order to enhance their own survival prospects. And of course, some things are more addictive than others, but we all know that the term is now being used for everything.
Gotcha.
And I have to say, like in my case, like I do love ice cream. And so I try to steer that toward how can I love ice cream and still eat a small quantity of it? So I can still have that circuit. We all have that circuit that says, oh, I got to have it. But we can then build new circuits to moderate it.
Yeah, good, very good. You know, as I'm thinking about it, an example in your book, you talk about the chef at French Laundry, how he gives small, very tasty portions as a way because he understands brain chemistry and how it works.
Oh, should I explain this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So there's this restaurant in Napa Valley in California, which was like considered like the #1 rated restaurant and very expensive. And you get like you could choose either 9 courses or 14 courses, and each course is only 3 to 4 bites because it's perceived that after 3 to 4 bites, you're just eating. You're not getting the wow feeling because it's not new information to your brain. So what I did was a thought experiment, a gedunk, it's called. What if I'm sitting at the French Laundry and I said, wow, this is the best dish I ever had. I want a whole plate of that. And then what if the chef brought it to me and then I start eating the whole plate and then I say, yuck, it's not as good as it was the first time. And I blame the chef, like, oh, he did something wrong. He didn't make it as good this time,
Right.
because we don't understand that perceptual bias.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful example. So let's bring hedonic treadmill or hedonic adaptation in for a landing. Let me see if I can summarize it for the viewers and the listeners. So basically, our brain is set up to go towards survival goals. For instance, the juice, the high-calorie sweet juice for the monkeys. But after 3, 4, 5 days, they actually got used to it. And for them to get a same surge of dopamine, they would have to go after something else. So it's like you have this lovely, or the French Laundry is another example of it, or you have this beautiful, lovely wife like I do. But if you're not careful, what you can do is you can actually become this, you have this adaptation. And would you say that, am I summarizing that right? Does this pervade all of life?
Yes. The short, simple answer is yes, it does.
Yes.
And the more you understand it, the more you can manage it. And it's futile to condemn it.
Right. And it makes so much sense. And as we get through this, basically one of the main themes, and please you jump in if I'm not stating it correctly, is that our brains were set up for survival, not happiness.
Exactly. It would not help a monkey to just surge on dopamine, but it's only a signal that you get as a reward for taking a step that promotes survival. And each of the happy chemicals I talk about corresponds to a drug of abuse. Dopamine corresponds to cocaine. So we all know what happens if a person takes cocaine. And so that's just an example of how I want it feeling is evolved to motivate action, but to actually have the feeling every moment, it's just not realistic to expect it.
Right. And also I think what you really emphasize is that the happy chemicals are metabolized, they go away quickly, and the unhappy
Yes.
chemical tends to have a longer half-life. So we're more attuned to cortisol, which we'll talk about in a sec. But I do have a quick question about my mammals at home here. They don't seem susceptible to this hedonic adaptation like human beings are because, well, they are with food and other things. But every day when my wife comes home, these dogs are just as happy, whether she's gone for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or a day, to see her. And it's just that it's really this unbelievable. So am I missing something there?
Yes.
How
Yes.
come they don't
Okay.
have that hedonic adaptation?
Okay.
Or maybe they do.
Because and what you're saying is part of this idealization of animals, that they're these superior beings with better qualities. No, the fact is that domestic animals are not a perfect model of our mammal brain, because our brain evolved to constantly invest effort to meet survival needs, and our pets are meeting their survival needs without effort, and therefore they have nothing else to put their effort into. They're sitting all day without doing anything productive. So when you get home, they're like, I need you, give me something. And so I'm thinking, you're reminding me, like when I come home and I want to appreciate my husband every day as much as a pet would, and you want to appreciate your wife as much every day. And yet the reality is that you've invested your energy throughout the day in the quest for new rewards, and your wife is not a new reward. And that's why as you're seeing with your efforts in promoting relationships, that it takes some effort to reactivate that circuit of like, oh yes, my partner is a reward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's interesting. And yeah, because these dogs don't have any safety or survival concerns at all. I mean, all they do is sleep 14 hours, 15 hours a day. So it's really not a good so now, because that really puts it together for me, because I'm saying they don't have this hedonic adaptation like human beings do. It's because
they have no other rewards,
gotcha.
and they have no other way to invest their effort to get rewards, which is the job our brain evolved to do.
All right, good. This is great. I want to keep going through some of the other chemicals. So we have dopamine, and we did a good job of explaining that. There's a lot of other applications, like in falling in love and some other things, which hopefully we'll have time to talk about. But I think we get it. Tell us about serotonin.
Sure. So serotonin is complicated because it's like the emotion perhaps that we least like to acknowledge, but is so obvious that in the world around us, people like the one-up position. And you can say it in tiny little examples and in big abstract theoretical examples. But in the monkey world, it's very easy to see, and in every other mammal, that the one-up position helps an animal get more food and more mating opportunity, and thus promote the survival of its genes. So animals are always struggling to get the one-up position, and when they get it, their brain rewards them with serotonin. So we can think of this as the feeling of confidence, like, I'm safe because I have the skill to assert myself, or I have the expectation that my needs will be met because I have confidence. Now, we have lots and lots of negative words for this, like ego, pride, superiority, assertiveness, feeling special, feeling entitled, seeking appreciation, seeking respect. It's something we desperately want. And why is it so desperate? Because in the animal world, when you're in the one down position, the stronger individual takes the food, takes the mating opportunity. If you don't submit, they bite you. So natural selection built a brain that after one bite, that's all it takes to wire me to say, whoa, I don't want to get bitten. I'm not going to reach for that food or mating opportunity. I'm going to find another opportunity where I'm in the one-up position. And you can see how, as much as we don't like to acknowledge that we all feel good when we're in the one-up position. The good feeling is quickly metabolized, and so we have to seek it again and again. And the more our other needs are met and our bellies are full and we're safe, then we drive ourselves crazy over this one-up position, because losing your one-up position is the biggest threat in your life, because you're safe from other threats. And that's why people are driving themselves crazy.
This is so important. This is so important, because as you study evolutionary psychology, and what you start to understand, that a lot of the safety and survival threats are virtually eliminated, certainly in modern society, Western society. And we're not being unrealistic. There's ghettos, there's wars, there's difficult spots. But by and large, 90% of Americans don't have safety and survival threats. They're in safe environments. So the social threats are the things that become the most predominant in their life. Is that accurate? Did I classify that accurately?
Yes, the social threats that they perceive or that they construct in their mind. I'm not saying they're real threats, because wherever you are, the threats that you perceive are defined by the neural pathways created by your past cortisol, your past threatened feelings.
All right. And so how do you see this affecting people in their day-to-day lives? Like, where are some of the major stressors that this causes for people?
So every individual, it's different. So as you go about your day, you can think about it like, if you're thinking, oh, they just want to, you're always thinking, oh, that person is just trying to put me down. Well, no, it's really that you want the one-up position, and they're not giving it to you, because they're a mammal just like you that wants the one-up position. As soon as you see that, you can just relax and to say, okay, I can't have the one-up position in every single aspect of every minute of every day. So why don't I just take a little time out to appreciate the one-up position I have, and then to make conscious decisions of accepting myself and saying, I have a limited amount of energy. Which social rewards am I going to go after, and calmly enjoy the steps I have toward advancing the appreciation that is healthy to seek.
You know, one analogy that when I was listening to your book driving, it was on the highway. You can see how people are almost obsessed by not letting you in front of them, because it seems like for them, it's some kind of analogy that we're getting one up. Somebody's getting ahead of them. And on the highway, they seem to be able to control it, where sometimes in their lives, they may not be able to. And it's really an interesting thing to watch. So, all right, let's move on.
Yeah, but can I just mention also on the highway, sure. Sometimes it's not that they're trying to one-up you, because I go through this with my husband all the time. Sometimes I let a person in, and sometimes I don't, because maybe by the time I realized they were trying to get in, I was too close and it wasn't safe, so I didn't let them in. So it's not like I was trying to one-up them. I was trying to protect us. So we don't always have to blame the other person for one-upping us, because we could just say, oh, maybe there was more to it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But a lot of times you see people and you should relax in traffic, obviously. It's almost like it can be a jungle, but you can see sometimes that motivation in people. It's really fascinating to watch. All right, let's go to oxytocin next, and let's kind of explain that. And then I want to use a global example to hopefully bring all this together.
Okay, so oxytocin is, as I said, each of these chemicals is known in other contexts. Serotonin is known in antidepressants. And again, the positive function of serotonin is not acknowledged by anyone but me, because it's so uncomfortable with the truth. Oxytocin.
I'm sorry, Loretta, explain that again. So when you say it's not acknowledged by anyone but you, I really want to bring that home for people, because it's
no one else is discussing the fact that serotonin, it's not just when you don't have it, you're depressed, but when you do have it, it's because you actually have to do something to get it. Nobody is saying that. And nobody is saying that you have to have confidence in your own assertion, because of course they think it's dangerous and they don't want everybody to go around stepping on each other's toes and cutting other, and they want to give people easy answers, and they want to blame capitalism for competitiveness. So, and they want to idealize the state of nature. So it's just not talked about. And the studies that I've gotten it from are ignored. And a lot of the people who did I shouldn't say early animal studies, because it's been going on for 100 years, but the early studies that I was reading, even those people who did this early in their career, they've now changed their tune in order to protect their career, and now they're on board with the, state of nature is all peace and love, and our society is the problem.
Gotcha. Good. No, that's very clarifying. So we got dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin.
Okay, so oxytocin, many people have not heard of it at all. Other people are in the oxytocin fan club because it's called the love hormone, and so it has it's very popular among some people, and many people have idealized it. As you can tell, each of these chemicals has a positive side and a negative side, and the same is true with oxytocin. So many people want to focus on like the positive, seeking ecstasy. And by the way, the chemical oxytocin is associated with is ecstasy, also orgasm. But the interesting thing is, if anyone is in the medical profession, you know that oxytocin triggers lactation and labor contractions in mammals, and fascinating that it triggers the egg-laying muscle in reptiles and birds, just to show you what deep origins these chemicals have.
Amazing.
Now, in the mammal world, it triggers herd behavior. Now, you can glorify herd behavior and think of animals as like all for one and one for all, and we all want to help each other and support each other. But in the mammal world, mammals seek safety in numbers to avoid getting eaten by predators. But once they have a group, then they have conflict within the group. And so that conflict in the reptile world, they can't even tolerate each other. But mammals, if they, it's a long, long story that's explained in detail, all my books, but just to say very simply that when I'm with the herd, I feel safe because it stimulates my oxytocin. When I leave the herd, then my oxytocin falls, I feel unsafe, and so I go back to safety in numbers, despite the frustrations that we all know that it's frustrating to follow the herd.
Wow. So there's a conflict then between serotonin and oxytocin.
Yes.
I'm glad you pointed it out because I missed that in the book, which is not like me. So that's really, really important.
And there's a conflict between oxytocin and cortisol, that when you leave the herd, your cortisol, that's the way I phrased it more in the book. And in the follow-up book, it's called The Science of Positivity, which is more about why negativity comes natural. And that's, when you leave the herd, you feel unsafe, your cortisol turns on. But then when you go back to the herd, that's frustrating. So we feel like we have these two bad choices often.
Got it. Oh, so I can see the conflict there. And draw an analogy to human beings with that, if you could. Is there a moving away from a group mentality towards, back and forth? How just because I'm sure you've thought about this, I'd love to hear what you think.
Well, we have to add one more complication, that because herds are frustrating, the only thing that keeps you in the herd is a common enemy. So animals disperse when there are no predators, but the more evidence of predator threat, the closer they gather. And therefore, in our daily lives, when we feel that there's a common threat, we stick together. When we don't feel like there's a common threat, we go out on our own. So in the modern world, what happens is, long story short, in the past, people were very tribal, and you could not leave your tribe. If you even left your village, you'd get killed on the road before you even got to the next tribe. And if you got there, maybe they'd kidnap you and kill you. So there was constant conflict among tribes, which is part of the reality that anthropology ignores. And then you stuck with your tribe despite the fact that they told you what to do every minute, and the higher ranking individuals got in your way of your prospects. So today, long story short, we have the freedom to leave the groups we're born into, and we have this idealized expectation that we're going to find some perfect herd, and we try this herd and we try that herd, and we get frustrated. And I was one of the worst offenders of, like, I try this job, I try that job, I try this group of friends, I tried that group of friends. And there's conflict everywhere, and everywhere there's mammalian social rivalry. And so the only thing that keeps people together, and listen to this throughout your day, everybody's talking about whoever is the common enemy of that group. So the marketing department and the sales department fight until they're both joining together to fight against another company. And two companies will fight until they're joining together to promote their industry against the government, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously the political situation is basically, in the modern world, everyone is so isolated because everyone has the freedom now to completely go off on their own as an individual and doesn't like being in a group. And then we feel isolated. So people have used politics as a substitute. But the only thing that keeps the group together is that constant reminder of a common enemy. And so politics is using that. They're constantly feeding you messages about the common enemy to sort of keep you addicted to that thought framework instead of seeing other information about the world.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I love it. So now we see this rise of, not to get political, but we see this rise of tribalism in American international politics.
Well, that's not I wouldn't say rise of tribalism. Well, I mean, tribalism has always been the mammalian thought process. So it's because our other tribes are gone. People have left their extended family, they've left their religion, they've left their, whatever. They need another way to fill that need for a herd. Okay.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And one of the authors I really like is this gentleman, Yuval Noah Harari. And what he does is he talks about the three main threats of modern society is nuclear war, environmental degradation, and technological disruption. And all these problems have to be solved on a global scale. They can't be solved by one country or even a group of individuals. They have to be solved by global cooperation. In the context of what you just discussed, do you see that as possible, or is there a way, is there a path forward in that context?
I don't agree with him. Okay. So he's part of this thought framework that our society is the problem. He's creating the idea that in nature it was all peace and love, and modern society, and there's another thing I call declinism. It's this crisis mentality. This is the subject of my book, The Science of Positivity. We are all going to die, and this is very uncomfortable to think about. And so when you think about it, it's so uncomfortable that you almost have to think about something else. And so when you focus on the earth dying and society dying and it's all coming apart, then you feel like, it sounds crude for me to say, but like, well, I'm not really going to miss out on anything because it's all coming apart. So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, in the past, people had grandchildren. If you were lucky enough to live to 40 or 45, you were living with your grandchildren and you invested in them. And every day you would watch them absorb your behavior patterns and your traditions and cultures. And so you would have that sense of living on through them. But today, if you have grandchildren, it's not until you're really old and they don't care about your traditions and they live on the other side of the country. And so we've lost that way of meeting our fear of our mortality. And so this whole political crisis mentality, to me, is a way of giving us a way to channel those those existential fears. Now, again, the whole idea of like this globalization, now that's another thing, is like, we globalists are good, you anti-globalists are bad. And all these problems could easily be solved if it weren't for those jerky anti-globalists getting in the way. So again, it's this simplistic good guys and bad guys common enemy framework that says, I'm morally superior, I'm a good guy, I'm in the one-up position. Even if I just sit on my couch and call the pizza man, I can feel like I'm a good person because I'm on the right team, whatever your team happens to be. So that's a classic mammalian thought framework to me.
Interesting. Fascinating. Okay. We could do this all day. I want to get to the final one, which is endorphins, because this has been talked about a lot. Why don't you just get into endorphins really quickly, and then we might have to do another one because this is going on pretty long, maybe as section 2. And then what are the purpose of endorphins and how are they abused? Talk about that.
Sure. So obviously endorphin means endogenous morphine. It's the morphine chemical released by the body when you're in real physical pain. We are definitely not to be releasing it all the time. It's only there for emergencies. For example, if you watch nature videos, which is fabulous, it was great for me, you see that like a prey animal has a lion's teeth in it hanging down, and the animal is still able to run with all its power because endorphin masks pain for 15 minutes. That's its job. After that, the animal is either dead or it feels its pain, because pain is an essential message that you are needing to protect your injuries. So the classic example I use is, if you've ever fallen and somebody says to you, "Are you okay?" and you say, "Yeah, I'm fine," and 15 minutes later you realize, "I'm not fine," because endorphin masks pain for 15 minutes. So if you were a caveman, it would give you that time to go for help, and then you would have to stop to protect your injuries. And the morphine in all of its various opioid forms feels good because our brain evolved for that specific function. And runner's high is the classic example that we've heard of in the past, but it's essential to know that runners do not get high every time they run. They only get it when they run to the point of pain. And we are not evolved to stimulate pain just to get the endorphin. And if we do that, we have to then stimulate more and more pain because of habituation. I'll repeat the sentence.
Yes.
So we are not evolved to stimulate pain to get the endorphin, because then we'd have to just release more and more pain. We'd have to trigger more and more pain because we habituate, and that would be a terrible survival strategy, which is why I'm very emphatic that chasing endorphin is not a survival strategy. But it's good to know that you get a little bit when you to get a little bit when you exercise, not to seek a high, and you get a little bit when you laugh, and to just be happy with a little bit.
Yes. Okay. Well, Loretta, I'm going to put you on the spot. Will you come back and talk to us again?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I agree that this is a long thing to listen to. And I knew from the beginning that you had such good questions, and so many, that it would be more than an hour.
Yeah. So what you've done is you've given us tremendous insights on how this direct us towards some resources. And as I said, what we're going to do is we're going to have you back to really do like a step 2 on this, because this is some of the best, most insightful material I've heard in a long time. And actually getting to talk with you about it, it even illustrates it and elucidates it even more. Actually, let's do one more thing. Let's talk about cortisol and its place, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, so cortisol, people have heard of as the stress chemical. It's nature's alarm signal. So it tells you you have to do something or else. And what that or else is depends on your own neural pathways. So each of us is born with billions of neurons, but very few connections between them. So when you're a baby, you're born and you're hungry, you're cold, you can't do anything about it. So one of the only circuits we have when we're born is to enable that behavior of crying. So crying is a big surge of cortisol because hunger triggers cortisol, cold triggers cortisol, and you can't do anything about it. It's like, yikes. And when you cry, that triggers a cascading of experience that builds more and more circuits that gives you more and more ways to meet your needs. But no matter how effective you are at meeting your needs, there's always going to be some obstacle. So from the first moment of life, it's like, I have that skill. I can meet a need. And yikes, I have an obstacle. I can't meet my needs. So nature's given us a happy chemical to reward us for taking that step toward meeting our needs, and an unhappy chemical that says, I have a problem. What I'm doing is not working, or I don't know what to do, and then the problem is still there. So the classic example I use is if you're a lion and you're hungry, that's cortisol. You chase a gazelle, that's dopamine. The gazelle gets away, that's more cortisol. And the cortisol tells the lion, uh-oh, you're going to keep starving because you're not going to get it. And the negative feeling tells the lion to give up on this chase, because if the lion keeps chasing gazelles that have gotten away, it's going to starve to death. So it has to know when to give up on that chase in order to find something else. And a dog, when a dog barks, it gets attention, like crying. And bottom line is to understand the good role of our cortisol, the healthy, natural function of cortisol, instead of believing you should have a stress-free life.
Yes, interesting, fascinating. Why does it, final question, why does it take 45 days to change these neural pathways? Is that your personal experience, clinical experience? And we're going to end it there.
Okay. Well, this is controversial. I'll tell you why I started with the 45 days and why I'm no longer focused on it. So I started with the 45 days because I was in a yoga class where they said, clasp your hands and then notice which thumb is on top. Now, change all the fingers so that the opposite thumb is on top. And it's so hard to do that you feel almost like you're holding hands with somebody else. It feels so weird. And they said that according to their research, that it takes 45 days to just learn to clasp your hands in the opposite way and for that to feel like your natural default. And I love that because that shows that our old neural pathways are so powerful, and yet they're not superior. There's no superior reason to have one thumb on top or the other. So it doesn't mean that your old way was right or wrong, but if you want to learn a new way, it takes a lot of repetition. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with, anything. It's just, that's what it takes. The other reason it takes a lot of repetition is because our neuroplasticity is designed to be very high when we're young and to plateau after puberty. The reason it plummets after puberty. The reason is because in the state of nature, you start having babies in puberty. And so your whole effort is to find food to keep the babies alive and stop them from crying, and then another baby comes. So you're not designed to start finding yourself in puberty. You're designed to build those survival skills so that they're ready to feed the babies when they start coming. So that's the whole thing about the 45 days. The reason I'm backing off from it is because people who are like, I don't know, they're so obsessed about this that rehabs are often funded for 30 days. And so that is people like think it's now some kind of crisis because if you're funded for 30 days versus 45 days. So what I said is if you're in a 30-day rehab, take 7 days, you got to figure out which circuit you want to create, then repeat it for 21 days, and then repeat it for another 21 days. So the bottom line is that it's hard in the beginning and it doesn't feel good at first, but if you repeat it, it will not only feel good, but it will feel normal and natural and effortless, but you have to repeat it for a long time.
Beautiful. Yeah, Loretta, this has been phenomenal. People need to really understand their brain chemicals. They need to, when that cortisol spurts come, not to do it not to relieve that in unhealthy ways. And we'll talk more about that in the future. But you have just been absolutely phenomenal. Any closing comments or words that you'd want to give us, or have we covered enough?
Well, let's talk about my website, Inner Mammal Institute. So I hope everyone will go to innermammalinstitute.org. I have lots and lots of resources that will help you apply this to every aspect of your life and to understand it on a deeper level. And I have lots of free resources in every format, whether you like to watch, listen, or read. And I also have a lot of books.
And coaching? Do you have coaching?
Yes, I do.
Beautiful. I mean,
thanks.
Yeah, phenomenal. And
Thank you.
we're gonna have you back.
Thank
and
you.
we really appreciate your time. This is Dr. Stephen Cangiano, president and co-founder of RDT.Media and Events. We really appreciate Loretta's extended time here with us, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.